So welcome, our brilliant and beloved colleague, Michael. We so appreciate your solidarity and your consistent commitment to community economic development. And as always at Sexy, we begin our conversations, our interviews, by giving thanks to the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We give thanks to all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So, Michael, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers and share a bit about your remarkable work, sir?
Well, my name is Michael Lewis. I've kind of been in this line of work since I was 17 years old, really. When I think the original motivation came even earlier when I was struck deeply and painfully by the conflict in Nigeria and the genocide of the Igbo people and the mess that was going on in the Niger Delta with the oil industry and the way that kind of corrupted and created, really tens of thousands of deaths. And it's had a long-lasting impact. And so that's the roots of what I'm doing today. And it expressed itself in community economic development because I was concerned with empowerment of people to take more control of their lives, to address the inequities and the structural dimensions of injustice. I worked closely with Indigenous people over a long period of time. And really, I was quite lucky. I found out young, I was unemployable. So I created organizations that could fit my values and I could live in. And essentially that hasn't changed. I've never had a proper job. So in terms of what I'm doing today is really an outgrowth of that history. And for years in community economic development, I did work all over the country and outside of the country and learned and learned and learned, and then tried to document and find ways of training and organizing that would build the infrastructure that enabled more people to learn and participate and, involve themselves in collective ways of trying to advance change that made sense. Yeah. My
Indeed.
current work. Yeah. You want to know about my current work? Yeah. Okay. So, because of the growing, ecological and environmental climate crisis that kind of intersects then with, the social justice dimension and community economic development, I with four other people, one of whom I co-authored a book with called The Resilience Imperative, we got together and we decided that we needed to try and do something around education that would enable people to begin to connect dots between the ecological, the environmental, the social justice, the concrete innovations that were emerging in all kinds of settings around basic needs, whether that be shelter, food, social care, precarious work, and so on and so forth. So that what we did is we created a little organ. Well, we just started working on trying to how to do that, and we were going to try it with Athabasca University around a massive open online course. And so for the last 9 years, I volunteered full time to kind of work on this, and it's been really quite a exhausting but also empowering journey to try, as a longtime practitioner, connecting dots and organizing all the time. We're dealing with systemic issues at a large level, some of which we have very little control over, at least at the moment. And so how do we do that around the basic needs? How do we elevate what's working where it's having impacts systemically on larger systems that would allow them to spread and scale their impacts. And so we just started working away at it. And then we did so that was in 2015. We actually did our first pilot, I think, with 40 people that we knew from around the world, just to give us feedback. And then we went from there. And, we've had, I don't know, in the 5 editions since the pilot, I think we've had maybe 3,000 or 4,000 people in a course called Towards Cooperative Commonwealth, Transition in a Perilous Century. And it's been a ton of work, lots of learning. And so we feel now we're just on the cusp of trying to integrate that experience and see where its weaknesses are and its strengths and how we might contribute to helping catalyze ecosystem of organizations that are involved in education and animation in these spaces, and to hopefully strengthen this work, because the challenges are deepening, and we're trying to figure out a more effective way of contributing on a broader basis. So that's really what we're really beginning now, really at these moments, to try and really work through. And we have, for the first time in 8-9 years, we've got 1 contractor and 1 staff person, which is amazing. Yeah. A young woman in Morocco who's just brilliant and wonderful network weaver and strategic inner thinking, and then a fellow who took the MOOC. Both of them have taken the MOOC, this massive open online course, and so they know it through it. It had an impact on them, and now they're drawn into this whole process we're trying to get underway, and that's probably what our focus will be for the next year or two.
That's incredible. What a journey. Thank you so much for providing all that context. And once again, a lot of times folks don't recognize the amounts of work, toil that goes into something so expansive, dealing with such high-level systemic issues. So once again, I applaud your leadership and tenacity and self-determination. So my next question is, what's inspiring you now? What has you curious, or what's keeping you up at night?
Yeah, well, what's keeping me up at night, and what inspires? Well, what keeps me up at night is the crisis is deepening ecologically. We've reached 7 planetary limits as of this year, and everybody who's got their eyes open can see the implications that are starting to play themselves out. And in terms of people working in the area of research and planetary boundaries, and also on the climate side, and climate scientists, I mean, anybody again that is able to kind of face these realities, it raises absolutely serious questions. And so what I've been, I mean, even though we've got all of this background, we've been doing this for years, our big question now is education for what? What are our assumptions? What are the narratives of all the assumptions associated, whether it's neoliberal capitalism and the assumptions of economic growth, and GDP is what matters, and blah, 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 all that stuff? Those are problems. That's part of what's driving the crisis. And transition as a concept, which implies some kind of systematic basis for, moving into a situation of trying to solve these problems, is becoming more and more challenging. And so when we're thinking about education for what, the questions are deep, and none of them are comfortable. There's no Pollyannish solutions that are evident. And I personally take, from a climate point of view, I take the point that many people are making in the climate science community, that every 1/10 of a degree matters. And from my point of view, that's a matter of imbuing meaning to what we continue to try to sort out and to make an impact on, realizing that it's a matter of intergenerational justice in some ways. What can we know? We do not have control, at this point. And so that's kind of the big picture. On the community side and our bioregions where we live, I think is becoming more and more important as the locus for weaving together networks, mutual aid, solidarity around resistance activities, but also around weaving together communities and support networks and ways in which people can take action around basic needs to maximize the potential for having positive energy that's drawing meaning from the process that we're in, and doing the best we can to create sustainable ways of meeting the basic needs closer to home, which is really the full circle, right? Doesn't it, in terms of community economic development, but it also community economic development. I for quite a few years in the Canadian Community Economic Development Network, in my kind of rather removed advocacy years ago, I was suggesting maybe we need to shift from community economic development to community resilience. Not that they are divorced from each other, but that that in terms of what we're facing, our capacity to adapt, support, strengthen community-based capacities in a variety of areas, collaborate across different sectors, and to begin to get a clearer analysis of how we can act locally and in our bioregions, and also support the broader kind of political struggles that are associated with with the gross injustices in the broader global system, whether it be around poverty or ecological destruction. And so that's the soup that I'm swimming in. And it feels a little thin at times, but I think that at the end of the day, coming back to the personal question, it's about creating meaning, and not just in my own life, but in terms of those that I can touch and weave together. Because if we don't have a sense of that, sustaining action over time is difficult, right? So I'm full of inspiring good news, right?
Well, I think your analysis
That's
is
where
bang
I'm
on.
at.
Your analysis is bang on, and I love that piece about intergenerational justice. Every time I hear you speak, reminds me, I was talking to a colleague earlier today, and we are talking about the fact that politics is way too important to have politicians handling it. So when I hear folks like yourself, I'm sharing your analysis and just the decades of work as a practitioner, but also as a thought leader, it really begs the question, like, we need better folks making decisions around some of the most important things in our generation. So once again, I just applaud your leadership, your tenacity, and your sheer resilience, because this is an uphill battle, and it's an intergenerational struggle that we can't really let our foot off, for a lack of better word, the gas. You know what I mean? But obviously, I really just applaud your leadership. So my next question is, do you have a set of key priorities right now in your work that you'd like to amplify to our listeners and our viewers?
Yeah, well, the key priorities right now for our organization is, and probably will not deliver the MOOC in the next year, is really to do this outreach. So we're already in a process internationally of identifying who might be in that ecosystem that are engaged in transition, from those that are focusing on the importance of grieving as a means by which to unleash us from, into the potential to contribute. At least in my life, I know when I've been in a situation where grief, it can be immobilizing. So unless one goes through it, one has a means by doing it, and there are many means. So how do we move from grief to resistance on the streets? And who are all the folks that are doing this work, right? And how do we weave them together into a collaborative? So we've been talking, we're just starting, we've been doing some initial research, but we're connected to a lot of people, in the social solidarity movement, the We Being Alliance. You can go through a long list of groups that we have connections with by virtue of our work over the last 30 or 40 years. But on the other hand, you know, there's a lot, how we weave these together, and create an ecosystem that's actually more powerful than we can ever be by ourselves. That's the big challenge, and it's an exciting one, and I think we're going to go on that journey. That's what we're going to do, and we think we can together across a number of different basic needs area and the kinds of training people are doing, and not just the kind of online training, but also how do we connect and actually weave together the people that can actually train people in areas that they're already expert in. So for instance, we created a lot of training materials over the year on community economic development that were used all over the place, and in Indigenous communities. There's, we did a lot of that kind of work, but there's other people that are doing work out there that, and we got that could engage in assisting people. So we see ourselves as trying to be a catalyst. Whether we'll succeed in that or not, I have no idea. But all I know is it seems to be the pathway that's opening up out of the questions that have emerged over the last decade of, trying to make a contribution and figure out a way that we might make a difference. Yeah.
Indeed, sir. So my second last question is, what is your ultimate goal, and what does success look like and feel like to you and your colleagues?
Success has never been a big word in my life. And it's not a question that in any of the things I've done, personally. So for me, just to give you an example, the community economic development work in Canada. In 1981, I was teaching a course up in a little remote community, Fort Chipewyan, Athabasca tar sands territory now. And I came across National Economic Development Law Center, and they, I got excited about community economic development. And then a couple of years later, I said, well, we got to build a national network. That was 1983, right? And then to get to the starting gate took another, 20 years. Well, not 20 years, but it took quite a long time and a lot of effort. So the success in that situation was to see a national network that might be able to accomplish some of the things that were being accomplished during the war on poverty in the United States by community development corporations. So that, in this context, when you ask me the question, what does success look like? Well, success would look like having a collaborative ecosystem that shared values, had various gifts and training and technical assistance and linkages to broader networks and so on, that could find ways of collaborating. So we think that if we can get to that, that would be success. Whether it would mean success in terms of shifting the bend of history that we're on remains to be seen. But that's where the values and aligning with organizations and so on that actually align with values about and attach meaning to intergenerational injustice, to ecological restoration, to a whole variety of innovations that we know can work, but are very tough sometimes to get the political base to push them, you know. So success to me is kind of surviving and thriving with some kind of dignity and making a contribution. And I think that's really the people that we have in play in our little wee organization right now. They share that. And, you know, we don't have any sense of easy fixes, right? So success is almost an oxymoron. It's meaning, right? And my original long-time I don't know, aphorism that I told myself is that our job is to make despair less convincing and hope more concrete. That had a different meaning for me 20 years ago because the polycrisis, to make despair less convincing and meaning, you know, more prevalent, internalized, because that's if we can't find meaning in the struggle, in the journey, and we, you know, we can find ourselves in false hope, right? And I think it's a spiritual, emotional, and intellectual challenge to kind of think about that unfolding. Yeah.
That's absolutely beautiful. Despair less convincing and hope more concrete. That is absolutely beautiful and inspiring, and definitely something to leave our listeners and viewers with. So my last question, do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action you'd like to amplify to our community of practice?
Yeah, in a collective sense, I don't think I have a call to action. I would think that for many people listening to this, that number one, you know, open yourself to the challenges we face. And there's no easy solutions to the predicaments we're living through. We are living in predicament that is unparalleled. So the call to action would be to, I'm having a hard one. I've asked that question before, you know, of others. You know, personal, family, community resilience, from a community point of view, from a bioregional point of view, the ecological and social and the care and how we weave those together in concrete ways in terms of something like ecological restoration. I mean, that's something that people can engage in, and it has spiritual, it has emotional benefits, it has action, it builds solidarity between people in a community. Those seem like small things, but that is the knitting we need to do, or that's how we need to set the warp and the weft and start threading, you know, to create a fabric that socially and culturally that enable us to take the decisions we need to make individually and in our organizations and networks that you know, to invoke a mentor of mine way back, to be able to survive with dignity. You know, yeah. Yeah, so I'm not into solutionism right now. So I don't have a nice, neat success point. It's
Regardless, all the sentiments and the provocations, the trends, the tensions shared were more than inspiring. They were a call to action in itself. And I think that intergenerational justice piece, especially making despair less convincing and hope more concrete, those are things that are so valuable in this time of great turmoil and the poly crisis and climate anxiety and just a general anxiety and trepidation people have around the deep polarization of so many views and perspectives across the planet. So once again, I just applaud everything you stand for, my friend, and all the work that you've been doing on behalf of so many. You said that you founded the organization in 1983. I was born in 1983. So that speaks to your tenacity and your resilience. I'm dating you a bit right now.
you're the same age as my youngest daughter.
There you go. So Michael, it's always a pleasure just to connect and to build and to reason. And once again, just amplify your incredible work to our community of practice. And as always at SETC, we close the conversation interview the way we began, by giving thanks to the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We give thanks to all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Michael, thank you so much for all that you do for so many. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Victor.